Lessons for Life, welcome to Thursday night and a very happy birthday to Captain Tom, who is 100 years old today. Although he's not Captain Tom anymore, he's Colonel. And apparently Colonel is better than Captain. I don't know how these things work. Why not just make him, I don't know, what's the best thing that you can become? Obviously a Knight of the Realm, I suppose. Will Captain Tom become Sir Tom or Sir Thomas? Do you have to be addressed by your proper name when you become a Sir? When you become a Knight of the Realm? I know that Sir Elton John and Sir Michael Caine, those aren't their actual names. They change their names. So yeah, maybe Captain Tom, who became Colonel Tom, will become Sir Tom. And would that be the right way to repay? Are we repaying him? Thank a 100-year-old man for doing his bit for charity, for the NHS. And the NHS is not a charity, and an old man should not have to be marching up and down his garden in order to help the NHS. But as was pointed out to me, he wasn't actually raising money for the NHS. He was raising money for NHS charities. So maybe that's a different matter. But the fact that he was walking up and down for the NHS was obviously on his mind, because we are all thinking of the NHS at the moment and the key workers doing those important jobs. You would have thought that the people doing the most important jobs in the country, the key workers, would get paid the most money. Isn't that how it should work? But it's not the most important jobs that get the most money. What is it that decides who gets the most money? I'm not sure. In the chat, Triple T is saying he is going to outlive us all. They don't make him like that no more. No, they don't. And Captain Tom, I keep calling him Captain Tom. Colonel Tom would have been born in the 20s. Much tougher time to be alive, surely. Just having survived a pandemic, a flu pandemic. He was 2 years after the Spanish flu pandemic. I can't imagine living in a time like that. But yeah, 100. Maybe 100 isn't that old anymore. We are all living longer, aren't we? Maybe 100 is the new 90. I wonder who the oldest person who watches this channel is. I do look at the statistics breakdown now and again, and it would seem that we're a heavily male dominated audience, and most of us are in our late 20s and early to mid 30s. That seems to be the demographic that enjoy this channel the most. So I wonder who is our oldest, most senior viewer or listener. And Triple T is pointing out, we are living longer unless we die soon. We are living longer. We have an aging population as well, because not only are we living longer, like good old Colonel Tom, we're not having as many children. We are barely replacing ourselves. Couples are having, on average, 2 or fewer children. And if 2 people don't have at least 2 children, they're not going to replace themselves. So we have a growing population and an aging population. And this is a statistic that I think should be looked at when we break down how many people are dying from COVID-19, how many people are dying overall. I've mentioned before that that's a statistic that I want to go deep and examine. And the daily, or rather the weekly death rate in the past month or so has been hitting 20,000. 20,000 people dying per week, all told. That's in the NHS, that's in hospitals, that's in care homes, that's in road accidents in total. And that is very high. Very high. So all those people saying, oh, this is a fake news, they're twisting the statistics and saying that people who die from cancer with COVID-19 are being put down as COVID-19. The death rate is at an all-time high. And I can only attribute that to the very real disease, virus, that is spreading around. But we have had similar weekly death rates before. And they have been due to massive outbreaks of flu. In 1989, we were hitting 19,000 deaths per week. In 1970, we got as high as 20,000 deaths per week, which is what we are on now. Tonight, good news from Boris Johnson. He is saying that we are over the peak. And he loves a metaphor, that guy. He's always saying we're going to send COVID-19 packing and using all these metaphorical phrases. But he thinks we're out of the woods, to coin another phrase. And that's great news if it's true. We shouldn't overreact. We shouldn't start running around like it's back to normal. But the point I'm trying to get to is that we have had such death rates before. We have been in such a critical time before. For example, in the 1970s with that flu outbreak, and we were hitting 20,000 dead per week. And 20,000 dead per week in the 1970s was a much larger chunk of the population. Even if more people are dying now, back then we had a smaller population. So 20,000 would have been a larger chunk, pound for pound, if you see what I'm saying. And not only that, we have an aging population as well. So the average age is older, and the people who are dying, obviously the elderly are more at risk. I know it hits the news every time a younger person is struck down with the disease, and we know that does happen and is possible. There's also worrying stories about a possible form of the illness that might hit young people harder, but the old are more at risk, and our population is on average older now. And the baby boomers, that generation when the population exploded following the Second World War, when all the soldiers came home, they are now in their 70s, and they have had an effect on the demographics all through the generations. There was always that chunk of larger than average bracket of the population. So maybe that would explain why we are being hit harder now, and maybe is that a reason why we shouldn't panic? The point was made that this was hit as badly in the 1970s, and we didn't bring the economy to a halt. I think we might be getting a call, but surely the only reason we've lost as few people as we have, I know it's 20,000, we've only lost 20,000 because of the lockdown. It must have saved lives, mustn't it? What does this caller think? Welcome. Like it. I wonder, are they doing this live? Do you think this is a recording or is this someone playing live? You've got a beautiful voice, caller. Okay, it's Arabic. I think. Oh no, I think no, it's English. This is Hello from the Other Side. Oh, thank you very much, whoever that was, lightening the mood. Yeah, well, I wonder, was that live? I don't think so, but it was very nice. I do appreciate that, and if you want to phone up and play something down the phone, as long as we're not going to get hit with a copyright strike, I don't mind. It's freedom of speech on YouTube. I'm all for that until they take me down. Thank you for sharing that, whoever that was. Yeah, although sometimes people do get pulled down on a technicality. They'll be talking about some subject, and then somebody who wants to derail them, someone who wants to put something over their mouth, like a PPE, piece of personal protective equipment, they will play something that will incur a copyright strike, and then that's it, derailed. In the chat, Triple T, you're saying, wow, that was beautiful. Yes, it was. And I think, was it? I couldn't tell it. I thought I heard some Arabic, and then it switched to English. Was it some kind of English-Arabic amalgamation of... what's she called? The lady that sings that song. My mind has gone blank. Why can't I remember? But yeah, if you know... And Triple T is saying there was Spanish in there as well. Was there really? We were talking about Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan the other night. He famously sang in many languages. I wonder which singer is the most multilingual. How many languages can you get in one song? I always find it a shame in the Eurovision when all these countries that have their own beautiful native tongue end up singing in English just because it's widely understood, because English has become the lingua franca, the language that is understood everywhere. And of course French used to be the lingua franca, not anymore. Wonder will it be Chinese? So yeah, if you want to phone up and play music down the phone, I've got no problem with that. You want to play your favourite song? I wonder what was number one in the charts 100 years ago, in 1920. Did they have music back then? But yeah, we have an ageing population, and that will have an effect on the statistics. The lockdown will have had an effect on the statistics, and it can only have had, surely, a positive effect. I know it's become a polarised issue, and people on the left want it to stay, people on the right want it to be lifted. I know it's not as simple as that, but that's the impression you get. That's the way it gets portrayed, and people become identitarian about it. I've said it before. I want whatever the right thing to do is, whatever's best for the safety of everyone. And 100 years ago, according to Triple T, anti-Muslim / Turkish songs were number one. Were they really? Were they really? Was that because the Turks were massacring the Armenians 100 years ago? Triple T? Would that be why? Was the Ottoman Empire dragging the good Muslim name through the mud? I wonder what Triple T is talking about when he says anti-Muslim songs were number one 100 years ago. Maybe you'd care to elaborate. Not sure. But yeah, music changes, people change. And if I can change, and you can change, everybody can change. But I want to get a call from our oldest listener. If you are over 30, then you're older than average, according to our listenership. But I would love to get a call from somebody who is 100 years old. And in the chat, Saj is saying, Triple T, you left the kitchen light on. Good thing I have keys to your house to close it. There's a strange comment. Watch out, Triple T. Saj is coming round to raid your fridge. How alarming. But don't be scared. It's okay. Yeah, I wonder who is our oldest listener and who is the oldest person you've ever met. I remember back in the old country, across the road from my grandma, there was an old lady, even older than my grandma, who people said was 99. And I remember she gave me a banana, and it was funny enough, the banana was old also and black and gone off, and I didn't really want to eat it. But you have to kind of be polite when an older person gives you something. And yeah, that was that. But then it turns out after she sadly passed away at what we thought was the age of 99, people said, oh no, we got it wrong. She was actually 100. So I remember being fascinated that I'd met a 100-year-old person, but I didn't know they were 100 when I met them. I thought they were only 99. What's in a number, I don't know. But when you are young, it's quite fascinating. Quite something to brag about in the playground. I met someone who is 100 years old. And in the chat, Celtic Crusader is boasting that he or she met someone who was or is 107. Wow, that's pretty old. That's the personal best. I can't beat that. Has anyone met anyone older, or is anyone older than 107? And Triple T is saying, need to get the diet going. Sick of fried food. Delicious but dangerous. Yeah. I know we've all changed our eating habits because of the situation, the lockdown. Yeah. And women do live longer than men. In the chat, Hassan Radwan is saying, I bet I'm the oldest watching. Oh, Hassan, don't speak too soon. You might be the oldest in age. You're certainly the wisest, I'll give you that. But you don't look a day over 21. Good old Hassan Radwan, who believe it or not, is a grandfather. So he might be the oldest, but he doesn't look it. And yeah, I remember when I was about 10 or so, I had the Guinness Book of World Records, and there was a French lady, I'm sure she's passed away now, sadly, in her prime. She was, I think, 121. That's the oldest person on record, apart from in the Bible when they used to live to 900, apparently. Yeah, and I think she met Van Gogh, which is kind of crazy to think that I've lived in the same era as someone who met Van Gogh. And when you think about going back even further and further, you wouldn't have to know that many people to know someone who knows someone who knows someone who knows someone who would have met Jesus or any of the other of your favourite characters from back then. And Dardasha is saying the oldest is the wisest. It's not always true, but in this case, I think it is. Yeah, wisdom. What's the difference between wisdom and knowledge? Answers on a postcard. What is the difference between wisdom and knowledge. I think my brother said wisdom is knowing that Frankenstein is the creator. No, knowledge. Yeah, knowledge is knowing that Frankenstein is the creator, not the monster. But wisdom is knowing that Frankenstein is the monster. Yeah. Wise words. Knowledgeable words. And Hassan Radwan is saying, not necessarily Daradasha. The older I get, the less I'm certain of. Yeah, but that's wise, isn't it? That is very wise to know how little we know. It always amazes me, or it doesn't really amaze me so much anymore. We live in an era where people, whether they're right or wrong, are certain about everything. They might not be right, but they're damn sure. And Triple T is speculating that they could have lived to 900 unless a day was considered to be a year then. They were only 90. And Hassan Radwan says, I think Rumi said, now that I'm in love, I reject all that I have written on love. Ah, wow. Feels like Valentine's Day already. Yeah. Triple T, I'd love to know if you really think people did live to 900, or are you conceding that things in the Bible and other books are just written in a different kind of language that we can't really apply to today? Or is it just wrong? Is it just crazy to think that people lived to 900? And if we throw that out the window and accept, as is logically sound, that people didn't live to 900 in the Bible, or 800, or 1,000, or who was it? Who was it who lived to be really old in the Bible? Who was that? There was one particular character who lived to be really old. Hassan Radwan will know it, I'm sure, because he's wise. Who was it who was really old in the Bible? I don't know. Well, okay, saying it was Noah. That's not the one I'm thinking of, but Noah was probably a ripe old age when he set sail in the ark. But if we put that to one side, or Nuh, as they say in Arabic, if we put that to one side and assume that people didn't live to these crazy ages, I wonder when did the first person live to be 100? When was the first time someone lived to be 100 actual years old? By which I mean solar years, not lunar years. And Hassan Radwan says in the Quran, it says he was 100 less 50. 100 less 50. If I work that out correctly, that's 1,000 less 50. Okay, 950. Presumably lunar years and not solar years. Because if you are a Muslim who likes to follow the lunar calendar, as they do, you're going to become a year older 10 days earlier every year. So someone who is, am I doing this right, 36 in normal years would be 37 according to the... Would you have celebrated 37 Islamic birthdays if you were 36 solar years old? Maybe. We'll find out. I think we've got another call. Who... Hold on while I turn the sound up. 1 second, caller. Yeah, we've got a call online too. Who's this?
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
I'm hearing you loud and clear. I hope the people at home are. How old are you, caller?
I'm 39 years old, almost 40.
Almost 40, but well...
I know I sound like I'm 20, but I look probably 60.
Well, you sound like that averages out at 40. You sound like a spring chicken. If you're 39 years old in the Western calendar, does that make you 40 Islamic? Have you had 40 Islamic birthdays? If you are indeed Islamic, I don't know. Is it something you've ever thought about?
That is a good question, but I assume the Muslim calendar, I assume is 12 months like the Gregorian calendar.
There's a word. It's 12 months, but it's 12 moons, so it's 10 days shorter. Hence why Ramadan comes around 10 days earlier every year.
Yeah, I thought it was just me.
Well, I know, that's what
as I got older.
Yeah. As I say to my mum, it feels like it comes around 10 years. It comes around earlier every year, just like Christmas, but it actually does.
Can I mention something about the age?
Yeah, please do.
900, 50 less or 50 more. Two things. One is that a day could have been a year. If for those guys back then, they could have referred to, as somebody mentioned, a day. It would really be seen as a year. But also, I'm kind of questioning that it is possible that they did live to that age. And let me say why I think that.
Yeah, tell me why.
If you look at us now, you mentioned in the beginning of the show that we're living longer, and the average age, I think 10 years ago was about 84. Now we're kind of looking at 94, and by the time the 40-year-olds, by the time we get to 94, we could be looking at 120, 130 if Corona doesn't get us. And that's a long time that we can be around. Our progeny in the future, if we're living to 120 and 130, they could probably look forward to living and look forward to the age of 100 and let's say 40, 50, 60, and the progeny after that could be a continuation, and in 400 years, 500 years, 600 years, they could genuinely live to that grand old age of 900.
But who wants to live forever? Queen said it. Would you want to live that long?
Hello?
Caller, would you want to live to 900?
My granddad, God rest his soul, he passed away when I think he was about 100, and he had really good health, and he used to say that the only thing, because he really had excellent health, where he would go jogging and he was absolutely fine and never needed glasses or walking stick or anything, but he used to say that the worst thing about being old is all your friends and everyone you grew up with is no longer around, and I'm sure Colonel Tom is experiencing and feeling that as he celebrates his 100th.
Thank you for using his correct title. Colonel, yeah, he's the Colonel now.
And one thing unrelated to what we're discussing, if I may, Saudi Arabia yesterday announced that they are allowing Hajj to go on. In Hajj, you could have 3-4 million people coming from all over the world. And I think if Corona is, as our Prime Minister thinks, diminishing, it certainly will return if the Saudis continue with their Hajj festival in a month or two.
The Hajj will go ahead, will it?
Yes, yesterday they mentioned that Hajj will go ahead as usual.
Well, I mean, a lot of people die at Hajj on a good year, don't they?
Yeah, but in this case, if you've got 4 million people coming from all over the world and those 4 million return to wherever they came from, then that is a lot of people, because keep in note that this Corona started with one woman. It was one woman who went to those church meetings.
Just like the Bible, Eve. It was Eve.
4 million.
Eve ate the apple, and in this case it was an infected bat, was it?
Well, whatever it was, it's causing hell, and it's going to get worse. And even if we evade this for a few moments, in a couple of months or so, when winter returns, or the beginning of winter, autumn, then it's just going to get worse. So I think we should all really stay in and have this eradicated completely, and then move forward and hope that this damn thing dies once and for all. Thank you.
I hope so. Thank you very much for your call. Thank you. Yeah, we hope so. We hope it's gone forever. BA in the chat is saying herd immunity is the way. as in Douglas herd. Is that BA? I think herd immunity is HERD. Am I right about that? And Dardasha is accusing me of blaming females all the time. Not all the time. Not all, but most. And don't forget, it's only in the Bible that the woman is blamed. In the Quran, both Adam and Eve, or Hawa, as she's known, are blamed equally. So there you go. Women's rights and all that. Hassan Radwan is saying, I don't find living forever a pleasant thought. At least not unless we exist in some better, more enlightened state. Yeah, like heaven, I suppose. But different people have different ideas of what heaven would be. And BA is spouting conspiracy theory as usual and saying staying in makes people's immune systems weaker. No one is blamed. They took responsibility. Who took responsibility? Who took responsibility, BA? What are you saying? What tinfoil hat nonsense are you spreading on this channel? No, look, he makes a good point, actually. If you just stay in and you don't go anywhere, surely that will have a negative impact as well. And he's explaining that he was referring to Adam and Eve when he said that they took responsibility. Okay, in the Quran, are Adam and Eve not blamed for the fall? I know that the narrative is not quite as blame game as it is in the Bible, and this need for a sacrifice to compensate for that fall is very much hamped up in the Bible. But same with the story of Abraham and Isaac, or was it Ismail, looking for a sacrifice. And in that story, the sacrifice isn't made, but the prophet in question, Abraham or Ibrahim, he needed to be willing to make that sacrifice. And for the Christians, the sacrifice happened when Jesus died on the cross. Muslims dispute that and say, well, he didn't die on the cross, but he was certainly suffering. BA says they did wrong, mistake or error, and we must face the consequences. Okay, so they did wrong. It's interesting that obviously Adam is acknowledged as a prophet in both the Bible and the Quran, but yet he makes a mistake. I suppose prophets are not perfect. They are human beings just like us, even though they have divine guidance. I don't know, different people will interpret that differently, I suppose. But we can be very tempted to say, no, my prophet or my God was perfect. And I think always seeking perfection or admiring perfection can be a very negative thing, because if you become a perfectionist, you may never get anything done, because you will think, if I can't do it perfectly, then I won't do it at all. And I do often say it doesn't have to be perfect to be good. But I hope BA is having a good Ramadan. I learned a very wise piece of advice from BA once upon a time, and he said, if you can't get it done in Ramadan, you'll never get it done. So I hope he is achieving lots of things that he wants to achieve over there in Scandinavia. And Hassan Radwan says, we are perfectly imperfect. Yeah, maybe we're just the way it's meant to be. We're not meant to be perfect. Who was it said that it's the imperfections in a diamond that give it its value? Is that true, or am I making things up as usual? Yeah, but striving for perfection. And BA is saying we all strive for perfection. Do we? It's okay to strive for perfection. I think that is not a bad philosophy. But if perfection is God and God is infinite, then that struggle for perfection will always be there. You will never complete the game. And BA is, I know, happen to know he works in the fitness industry. I'm sure the same applies. You're always either going forward or going back. People talk about maintaining. I'm maintaining now, but the way you maintain strength and fitness is by building fitness. You always need to move forward, and if you stagnate, you're actually falling back. And Dardasha is enjoying the quote from BA, and BA is saying we aren't designed to be angels. That's why we rely on mercy. Yeah, rely on mercy, and I hope that we show mercy. But let's take a call. Let's see who's on line 2. Welcome. Who's this?
Hi, it's Mac. You're
Superb. Right. Welcome back, Mac. Return of the Mac. How are you?
Yeah, good. How are you?
I'm fine, and we're celebrating 100 years of Captain Tom. Funny enough, Mac, you when I found out your age, you were older than I thought. But you don't have to give that away. But if you don't want, just a clue.
I'm actually 1 year younger than your last caller.
Are you? I'm trying to work out how old is the last caller. 39. What are you? 38.
Coming to.
Wow, coming up 38. Wow, you're not far off Captain Tom, but you're a young 30.
Imperfections, by the way. I know this is off subject, but I'd like to bring this up.
Go on, Matt. We go any direction you want. Go on.
Did you know when they make a Persian rug, you know how they make the patterns like symmetrical in some ways?
Perfectly symmetrical.
Yeah, but if you have to find there is one part of it that they don't, and that they leave that part imperfect, so that in reality, from a far distance, like when you look at, you're thinking everything's symmetrical, but really and truly, when they make the Persian carpets, what they actually do is leave a part of it all different.
Is that right?
Obviously, the only thing, like you said, was God being perfect. So even with the Persian rug, the secret in that is that when they make the rugs, they make them a bit slightly imperfect.
Wow. And is that how you tell a genuine Persian rug then? There is an imperfect part?
No, well, naturally, they all do it. It's an old tradition. Anyone knows about Persian rugs will know this.
Wow, I never knew that. And it's out of respect for God, because God is the only perfect one.
Of course.
Wow.
We don't even consider ourselves perfect, so therefore, if we're going to rely on something or sit on something, it's not going to be perfect. It's going to, again, the only thing perfect is, so the ideology behind making the carpets, for me, I was astonished to actually, because I've got so many carpets obviously here and there, as we do, Persians do, but I've never realized this until I actually spoke to someone who's obviously an expert and said to me, yeah, this is the way they've been doing it for years. It's an old Iranian tradition or mentality, and they realized this obviously throughout time. So this is what the imperfection thing is. It relays on the carpet, but you'd have to know the background story as well.
Wow, that's amazing. I remember buying my mum some garment from the women's collective in Hebron, occupied Palestine, the town of Khalil, and these intricate cross-stitching sort of designs that they put on there are absolutely magnificent. And if you looked closely, you could see it wasn't. There was some stitches that weren't actually perfect. And my mum really loved that. She's like, wow, a factory could reel off a completely perfectly stitched carbon copy of the previous one and make 1,000 of them, but this was a hand-stitched piece of artwork.
They left it like that because of the same tradition. I mean,
could be, yeah. Now that you mention it, it could well be.
Yeah, no, I know this about the Iranian rug, so I wouldn't. wouldn't be my surprise if other cultures around, like the Arabs or even Syria, like you say. Was it Syria? You said?
That was Palestine.
Palestine. Okay. So yeah, even Palestine. I mean,
or as you call it, something else. But anyway, yeah. BA is saying, what do you think of fake rugs? I think they're no good. But what about the Islamic fascination with geometry and repeating patterns? I mean, I've been to Alhambra Palace in the south of Spain, which was part of Al-Andalus when the Muslims ruled Spain, and from recollection was absolutely mathematically perfect. Hassan Radwan's mentioning, ironically, it added to its perfection and value. This palace was I think it was meticulously mathematically correct. So there has been an admiration of what's the spiral called? You're going to know it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you're saying, but historically, even the Taj Mahal, the people that actually made it for the king,
the restaurant,
they were Persian builders, so the geometry, obviously, they were on point for them to be able to make a design so beautiful. But again, I haven't seen it, I haven't been to that, but the history behind who made it for me was fascinating again. So yeah, the Persians had geometry on lock I mean, it goes back to Abyssina or however you want to pronounce it.
Yeah. The Persian mathematician whose name they try to Romanize, Hassan Radwan, is saying Kintsugi is a philosophy of beauty in imperfection. It treats cracks and repair as a valued part of an object rather than something to disguise. Yeah, if only we could all embrace that and stop searching for perfection. It might stop a lot of young women and men who resort to eating disorders because of Instagram and all of that. Hashtag no filter. But funny enough, Matt, you were saying to me not long ago about the circle and the circle being perfect and 360 degrees being perfect.
Okay, now that we're getting on.
Now we go. Here we go.
Being 100 years old and Noah being 800 or 950 odd. Now the days. I mean, apparently the sun is getting further and further, so the rotation of the sun is different. The calendars have changed. I mean, each philosopher has come along and they change it from everything rotating around the Earth to now everything's rotating around the sun. So from throughout history, 500 years ago, you would have believed the theory of the heliocentric was introduced and people had started accepting it. But 500 years before that, people were convinced that we were living on flat Earth.
Oh no! Oh no!
I'm just saying.
Mac, no! No!
So anyway, the rotation of the Earth at the time of Noah was different to the rotation. That's why we have 365 days instead of 360 degrees.
Okay. Do you think once upon a time we had 360 days?
Well, I believe that's how they would have started, because a circle is 360 degrees. So for the sun to go around in a circle or a circular motion, it'd have to go 360. So they would consider they would try. That's how the Mayans or the Aztecs or whatever started initially trying to do. So that's how it was. It was broken down because obviously of the circular motion and it obviously equating to 360 degrees. So that 360 degrees was something for them to start with. And slowly, now whether it's the rotation of the Earth or, like I say, each theory is changing from time to time. And so, again, even the Georgian or Gregorian calendar is obviously, it makes a difference. And like for Muslims, since Hijrah, they obviously, 28 days in a month. That's why, they would be a year or consider someone a year older than. But then you do know about the Chinese, right? They consider when you come out on your first basically when you're born, they consider you one because they say 9 months you're already in the womb. So that's like that's three quarters of the year at least. So that's that's how the Chinese consider it. I believe I think I've heard sort of.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard when you're born in China, you're one. Fair enough. But what was I going to ask you? Yeah, and Hassan Radwan might back me up on this. The Arabs prior to Islam had a solar calendar, and the months in the Islamic calendar, which are the Arabic months, reflect the seasons. Originally, the months would always be at the same time in the solar year, and would be. Do you understand what I'm getting at, man?
Yeah.
And then the Quran said change that, follow the follow the moon.
It's a religion based on the lunar.
It is now, but the Arabs, like Rabi al-Awwal, the first spring, that was always in springtime, from what I understand. And different months. I don't know what Shaban means.
So you do know the Persian calendar. We celebrate the New Year in March.
Yeah, Nowruz always.
Sorry.
It's Nowruz is always in March and is always in spring, obviously.
Yeah, the opening of the new season.
Mm-hmm.
That's why. But we kept it every because we know that from March onwards, it's a change of season. That's when you're gonna start seeing some sun. So that's why we decided. So, but Arabic calendar again is because it's lunar. I don't see it being seasonal in that sense.
No, it's not. It's not now because of the Quran. The Quran instructs the Muslims to follow the moon, not to add days to keep the seasons according to the months. Now, you always look for the wisdom and the logic and the mantiq and the amal, as you've said before. What is the logic in making that change? Why follow the moon rather than the seasons? Why end up with a situation where Ramadan comes around 10 days earlier every year?
There's prayers. I don't know why, but apparently supplications at night times are. But I don't know. I mean, it goes back to. Because they used to, back in the day, they used to worship Neptune's, and then they started worshipping Saturn, and they were worshipping, obviously, the moon, the sun. But it could be a tradition that, who's to say? I can't, I don't know, I'd rather not say, because if I knew it, then I'd say, yeah, this is what it is.
No problem.
But I honestly can't say, do you have any idea yourself?
Only that it might be more useful to know when a month had started than when a year had started, and it makes it a bit more precise for planning things in the near future.
Yeah, but then if you thinking of season-wise, then it's gonna not it's gonna conflict with.
Yeah, that's true. That's true, and it also means that months start different times for different communities, and of course Ramadan and fasting starts in some countries and not others, and people often look at this as like a negative thing, like, oh, look how divided the ummah is. Saudi Arabia are doing it this day and Pakistan are doing it that day, but what's wrong with that if that's what it says in your book?
It's a moon. You know what the funniest part is? For example, my mum, if she was to fast, should wait for Iran to see if they've. Now, Iran sightings got nothing to do with the UK sightings. Like, why don't you're meant to use the approximation of where you're staying, and that's how. But I don't know. That's why Saudi, whenever they spot their moon, people who follow the Saudi or Wahhabism, they would start from. But it depends on like the regime and and the country that actually spots the moon in that state. Mm. So that's why there's a bit of a difference. But what's funny is now it's falling on summer, but there are times where it falls on winter.
Yeah, 10 days earlier every year.
That's the easiest when Muslims have it.
Hassan Radwan is making a good point. Arguing about moon sightings is part of the fun of Ramadan. Yeah, I guess so. It does what makes sense.
I'm saying if it was always in summer, then fasting would be difficult. But this way, because some like every I think 5 or 7 years or something, it switches. So now we're fasting in like summertime, so the days are longer.
I'd love to look at the statistics. Are there more conversions to Islam in the years that fasting is nice and easy and you're breaking fast at 4 p.m? I wonder.
Yeah.
Triple T says, no one really argues, but just a disagreement. Well, arguing about arguing now, Triple T. Arguing about whether they argue about the sighting of the moon. Have you come here for an argument? No, you haven't.
You know, they were playing Quran, reciting Quran in Italy, in places like New York. They were playing Adhan for the beginning of Ramadan. I don't know if you're aware of this.
No, what? Why were they doing that?
Well, it was a sign of well, I don't know. This is what I'll send you the link. I think it was near the Vatican as well. Like in Italy, they recited the Quran. I can't remember what surah it was. But
how lovely and inclusive of them. That's good. That's a good thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, that shows that. I mean, bringing communities together. This is where we've got to realise it doesn't matter color, race, religion, or nothing. We're fighting the same enemy. It doesn't care of your religion, your race, or your color, or age, or anything, or your gender.
I heard Muslims are surviving COVID-19 more so because they wash their hands often.
Well, I'm baffled with some statistics like Sweden's, how they're not on lockdown, and like there's some. Have you heard about that or not?
Yes, I have, but Sweden have had fewer cases than the UK, but Finland and other neighbouring Scandinavian countries have had even fewer. So it doesn't mean that no lockdown means better. It just means that Scandinavia has not had it as bad as we have, and had they done a lockdown, they might have saved even more lives. You can always pick the number you want to look at.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I was also gonna say, but again, I think I was watching another program. They say that.
How dare you?
About being 100 years old.
Oh yeah.
The royal family, they tend to seem to be. Well, this goes back to the 1700s even, or 1800s. So you can't say it's but for some reason, I don't know if genetically their genes or blood is different, but they tend to have long lives as well. Yeah. Up to 100 as well.
The blue blood, they tend to live longer.
Yeah, I mean the Queen Mum, is she still alive?
Sadly not. She died about 20 years ago, Mac. Where you been? But yes, she did live to over 100. God rest her.
My point. Sorry.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think the rich live longer, don't they?
Well, they know what to eat healthy, and well, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it's about eating right, and I'm sure I can't imagine the Queen eating about with fries. You see what I mean?
Can't imagine her chomping on a Big Mac.
She's got too much class.
And in the chat, BA saying in Sweden they have the lowest numbers of ICU cases in the whole of Scandinavia. Okay, but I've heard that other Scandinavian countries had fewer deaths, pound for pound. It all depends on what numbers you look at, and I just hope that we've done the right thing. BA is very proud of what Sweden has done, obviously. But look, Mac, we're going to wrap it up. I appreciate you getting in touch. Thank you very much. Wonderful.
That was a good chat. Take care.
Thank you, sir.
Speak soon.
Thank you. Well, there goes Mac, loyal listener, viewer, contributor, and it's good to have BA in the chat. BA, we were meant to be meeting on Instagram and doing our daily updates. I don't know what happened to that, but we have to get back involved. Triple T is saying Princess Diana didn't live long, rest in peace. Well, she was not a original royal. She married in and then sadly lost her life. And BA is accusing our monarch of a crime. Peace and love, Hassan Radwan, thank you very much. HK Stocks is saying Taiwan closed its borders, told everyone to wear masks, no lockdown, only 6 deaths. And BA is saying that tomorrow we will go live on Instagram, so follow us on Instagram at Lessons4Life247 and you might see it live. If not, we'll upload the results on here. And find BA, I think he's called BA 1980 or something on his Instagram. Safe Clark, thank you very much. Thank you all. This has been Lessons for Life, and we will do it all again soon. It's been great. We were here and we are gone. Latest.